A pause. The older cop's jaw tightened. He exchanged a look with his partner, then exhaled sharply. The younger officer finally moved, reaching for the cuffs and unlocking them. Marcus pulled his hands forward, rubbing his wrists where the metal had dug in. No apology, no explanation, just an order. You're free to go. Marcus stared at them in disbelief. That was it. After all this? Jared stepped forward. That's it. You're not gonna explain what just happened. His voice was sharp, filled with the same frustration that Marcus felt, but wasn't letting show. The older officer squared his shoulders. There was a mix-up. A mix-up, that's what they were calling it. Marcus took a slow breath, keeping his anger in check. He had learned to pick his battles, but this wasn't something he could just walk away from. Because there was one thing still nagging at him. If this was really a mistake, if this was just a mix-up, then why did it feel like something much bigger was at play? And more importantly, who reported his car stolen in the first place? Marcus stood there for a moment, watching as the officers walked away, their radio still crackling with chatter from dispatch. The weight of what just happened pressed against his chest. A mix-up. That was all they had to say. He turned to Jared, his jaw tight. Thanks for stepping in, man. Jared shook his head. This wasn't right. You know that. His voice was low, serious. They weren't even listening to you. Marcus exhaled sharply, glancing around. The crowd had started to thin, people drifting back to their cars, but a few were still lingering, whispering among themselves. Some shook their heads. Others just stared, as if waiting to see what he would do next. But what was he supposed to do? Demand an apology? Chase after the cops and force them to admit they had jumped to conclusions? He had been in situations before where respect had to be earned, where questioning authority meant trouble. But this was different. This wasn't a war zone. This was home. Still, one question kept turning over in his mind. Who had called the police? Who had reported his car stolen when it had been his all along? Jared must have been thinking the same thing because he pulled out his phone. I know a guy who works with dispatch, he said. He might be able to tell us who made that call. Marcus hesitated. He had been ready to let it go, to drive home and try to shake off the weight of what had happened, but now he wasn't sure he could. Let me know what he says. Marcus told him, then climbed into his car. His hands were still tense on the wheel as he pulled out of the gas station, his mind racing. By the time he got home, the exhaustion had set in. He locked the door behind him, tossed his keys on the table, and sank into the couch. But his mind wouldn't rest. His phone buzzed. A message from Jared. Asterisk, asterisk, you're not gonna believe this. Asterisk, asterisk. Marcus sat up straight, his pulse quickening. He called Jared immediately. You find something? Jared's voice was tense. Yeah, the call about your car being stolen. It didn't come from a random bystander. It came from inside the system. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? I mean it was flagged before the cops even got the call. Someone ran your plates before you even pulled into that gas station. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. That didn't make sense. So someone was already watching me. There was a long pause. Then Jared said, looks like it. Marcus leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't just some random call from a nervous stranger. Someone had deliberately reported his car stolen. But why? And more importantly, who? Marcus sat in the dim light of his living room, his phone still pressed against his ear. His mind was racing. Someone had run his plates before the police were even called. That meant this wasn't just some random misunderstanding. Someone had intentionally set him up. "Do you have a name?" Marcus asked, his voice low, controlled. Jared hesitated. "Not yet, but I have a feeling this wasn't just some officer checking plates at random. This was targeted." Targeted. The word sat heavy in Marcus's chest. He had dealt with pressure before, with situations that didn't make sense. But this was something else entirely. "I'm gonna figure out who did this," Marcus said, standing up. His reflection stared back at him from the dark window, his own eyes unreadable. Jared sighed. "I was afraid you'd say that." Marcus wasn't about to let it go. He needed answers. And there was only one place he could start, his own military records. The night was supposed to be just another normal drive home. The city lights flickered against the wet pavement as Sergeant Marcus Reynolds, a decorated Army veteran, pulled into a gas station to grab a bottle of water. He had just finished a long shift at the base and was looking forward to a quiet evening. But in just a matter of minutes, his world would be turned upside down in a way he never expected. As Marcus stepped out of his sleek black sedan, a car he had worked hard to buy after years of military service, he noticed a patrol car creeping up behind him. At first, he didn't think much of it, just another officer making his rounds. But then the headlights flashed, and a stern voice blared from the cruiser speaker. "Hands where I can see them. Step away from the vehicle." Confused, Marcus froze. Was it some kind of mistake? He slowly turned around, raising his hands as two officers stepped out. One had his hand resting on his holster. The other, a younger officer, looked tense, as if expecting trouble. "What's going on, officer?" Marcus asked calmly, keeping his voice steady. The older cop, a hardened officer with a sharp glare, wasted no time. "We got a report of a stolen vehicle matching this description. Step away and keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus blinked in disbelief. "This is my car," he said, his heart pounding. He reached into his pocket for his wallet, but the officers reacted immediately. "Don't move," the younger cop shouted, stepping forward. Marcus held still, his mind racing. He had been trained to stay calm in high-pressure situations, but nothing in the military had prepared him for this moment. He could see by their body language that they had already made up their minds. He wasn't a car owner. He was a suspect. "Check my registration. My name's on it," Marcus insisted, but the officers weren't listening. Instead, they moved in, grabbing his arms and pushing him up against the hood of his own car. The cold metal pressed against his skin as they patted him down, treating him like a criminal. By now, a small crowd had gathered. People pulled out their phones, recording the incident as Marcus tried to reason with the officers. "This is a mistake. I can prove it." He protested, but the cuffs clicked tightly around his wrists. One bystander, a woman in a red jacket, stepped forward. "I think you should at least check his ID," she said, her voice laced with concern. The officers ignored her. At that moment, another voice cut through the tension. "Wait, I know him," someone said. A man stepped out from the crowd, his face illuminated by the gas station lights. What happened next would not only reveal the shocking truth behind the arrest, but also spark a conversation that would reach far beyond this single moment. Because the truth, it was far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. The crowd grew silent as all eyes turned to the man who had just spoken. He was tall, dressed in a navy blue work uniform, his expression serious as he stepped closer. The officers hesitated for a moment, their grip on Marcus still firm. The man pointed at him. "His name is Marcus Reynolds. He's a soldier. I know him." Marcus looked up, recognizing the man instantly. Jared Thompson, a mechanic who worked near the base. They had spoken a few times when Marcus had taken his car in for maintenance. It wasn't like they were close friends, but right now, Jared's presence felt like a lifeline. The older officer narrowed his eyes. "You know this man." Jared nodded. "Yeah, and I know that's his car. I worked on it myself last month. He showed me his registration. It's in his name." The younger officer glanced at his partner, uncertain. The situation had started shifting, but Marcus was still in cuffs, still standing in the harsh glow of the gas station lights like a suspect instead of a man trying to get home. His heart pounded, frustration building inside him. He had done nothing wrong, yet here he was, being treated like a criminal in front of strangers, recorded on cell phones that would soon send this moment spiraling across the internet. The older cop wasn't convinced. He turned to Marcus. "If this is your car, why did we get a report saying it was stolen?" Marcus clenched his jaw. "I have no idea. Maybe you should ask whoever made that report." His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now. He had spent years putting his life on the line for this country, and yet, here he was, being doubted over something as simple as his own vehicle. The officers still weren't moving to check his ID, still weren't easing up. It didn't matter that someone had just vouched for him. Something was keeping them on edge. Marcus could feel it in the air. And then something strange happened. The radio on the older officer's shoulder crackled, and a voice came through. The weight of it settled in his chest, but instead of fear, something sharper burned inside him. Determination. Whoever sent this thought they could intimidate him. They were wrong. He stepped outside, scanning the street. His car sat in the driveway, untouched, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. He got in, locked the doors, and dialed Jared. "Tell me you got something," Marcus said, his voice steady. Jared's voice came through tense. "I traced the number that texted you. It's masked, but the signal bounced through a private server linked to, get this, an insurance company." Marcus frowned. Insurance. Jared hesitated. "Yeah, but not just any company. A firm that handles high-profile military personnel and government officials." Something clicked in Marcus's mind. "That's why they had access to my records." "Exactly," Jared said. And I dug deeper. Turns out, someone filed a fraudulent stolen vehicle claim under your name a day before you were pulled over. Marcus's grip tightened on the wheel. So someone wanted my car flagged. But why? Jared sighed. "I think I found the answer to that too. The claim wasn't just about your car. It was linked to an ongoing internal investigation, one involving stolen military funds." Marcus's breath caught. "What?" "Dude, someone's been moving money through dummy accounts, and guess what? One of those accounts has your name on it." Marcus's mind raced. He had never seen a cent of stolen money. But someone had set him up, made it look like he was involved in something illegal. The false stolen vehicle report wasn't random, it was bait. A way to pull him into the system, put him under scrutiny, maybe even arrest him before he could ask questions. And the person behind it, they were close. His phone buzzed again. Another message. Asterisk asterisk last warning. Walk away asterisk asterisk. Marcus exhaled. Then slowly he typed back. Asterisk asterisk, not a chance asterisk asterisk. He drove straight to Jared's shop. By the time he got there, Jared was already outside, pacing. He looked up as Marcus pulled in. "Man, you sure you want to do this? We could be dealing with some serious people." Marcus nodded. "I need proof." Jared pulled out his laptop and showed Marcus the files he had uncovered. Bank transfers, false names, military contracts tied to a high-ranking official on the base. Marcus scanned the names, his stomach twisting. One of them stood out. Colonel David Shaw. A man Marcus had trusted. A man who had mentored him. He shook his head. No way. Jared pointed at the screen. It all leads back to him. He's the one who accessed your records. He's the one who made it look like you were part of this mess. Marcus felt a cold fury settle over him. Shaw had framed him. He had nearly cost him his freedom, his career, his life. His phone buzzed one last time. Asterisk, asterisk, you should have walked away, asterisk, asterisk. Before Marcus could react, the sound of screeching tires filled the air. A black SUV rounded the corner, speeding toward them. Jared's eyes widened. Marcus. But it was too late. The SUV skidded to a stop. The doors flew open. And then, everything went black. Marcus came to with a pounding headache, his vision blurry. He was in a dimly lit warehouse, the air thick with a scent of oil and dust. His wrists were tied behind his back, the rough rope digging into his skin. Across from him, Jared was slumped against a wooden crate, his breathing shallow but steady. Footsteps echoed in the space, slow and deliberate. A familiar voice cut through the silence. I warned you, Marcus. Colonel David Shaw stepped into the light, his expression calm, almost regretful. He wore civilian clothes, but there was no mistaking the authority he carried. He crouched in front of Marcus, studying him like a puzzle he had yet to solve. I didn't want it to come to this, Shaw said, shaking his head. But you wouldn't let it go. Marcus's jaw tightened. You set me up. Shaw sighed. I protected you for years. I thought you were smart enough to stay out of things that didn't concern you. Marcus's fists clenched. You stole from the military, framed me to cover your tracks. That concerns me. Shaw exhaled through his nose, disappointed. It wasn't about stealing, Marcus. It was about survival. Do you know how many men get left behind when they've served their purpose? I built a system to make sure that never happened. Marcus glared at him. By laundering government money? Shaw's expression darkened. By taking what was already being wasted and putting it where it mattered. But you wouldn't understand. Jared stirred, coughing. Sounds a lot like greed to me. The next morning, Marcus drove to the base. He walked through the gates with purpose, his uniform crisp, his boots hitting the pavement with steady force. He had spent years serving his country, dedicating himself to a system that was supposed to be built on integrity. But now, for the first time, he wondered if that system had turned on him. He went straight to an old friend, Sergeant Bill Carson, a man who had been in charge of administrative records for years. If anyone could access the right files, it was him. Carson looked up from his desk when Marcus walked in. Didn't expect to see you this early, he said, leaning back in his chair. Marcus didn't waste time. I need to know if anyone's been looking me up. Carson raised an eyebrow. Why? Marcus exhaled. He debated how much to say, then settled on the truth. Someone reported my car stolen, but they knew my plates before I even got pulled over. I think someone ran my records before the cops even showed up. Carson's expression hardened. He turned to his computer, his fingers flying over the keyboard. A few minutes passed in silence as he searched through the system. Then he stopped. His face changed. What is it? Marcus asked. Carson hesitated, then slowly turned the screen toward him. There in plain text was a record showing that someone had accessed Marcus's personal file just a few hours before the police had stopped him. His full name, his military ID, his address. Everything. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Who pulled this? Carson clicked a few more buttons, but then his expression darkened. It's coming from a restricted access code. Meaning someone high up covered their tracks. Marcus's jaw clenched. Someone with power had been digging into his background, and they didn't want to be found. He stood there, staring at the screen, feeling the weight of something much bigger than just a mistaken arrest pressing down on him. Someone wanted him flagged. Someone wanted him stopped. But why? And more importantly, what were they trying to hide? Marcus stared at the screen, his pulse pounding in his ears. A restricted access code. Someone with clearance had pulled his records, and they didn't want anyone to know. This wasn't just about a traffic stop anymore. Carson leaned back in his chair, rubbing his jaw. Look, man, I don't know what you got yourself into, but whoever did this, they don't want to be found. Marcus clenched his fists. There has to be a way to trace it. Carson exhaled, glancing around the room before lowering his voice. There's one thing. If I run a deeper search, I might be able to see which department the request came from. But if I do this, I could get in trouble. Marcus met his gaze. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Carson hesitated, then nodded. He turned back to the keyboard, typing quickly, his fingers moving with practiced speed. The screen flickered as layers of security peeled back, revealing hidden data. Then suddenly, the screen glitched. A warning message popped up, *** access DNIED. Unauthorized attemptee LOGED***. Carson cursed under his breath and quickly shut the system down. Someone's watching this in real time. Marcus felt a chill crawl up his spine. This wasn't just some mistake. This was deliberate. And now, whoever was behind it knew that he was looking. Carson looked up at him. I can't go any further without raising alarms. But from what I saw before the system shut me out, this request didn't come from the base. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Then where did it come from? Carson hesitated. A federal database. The words hung in the air like a threat. Marcus sat back, his mind racing. Why would a federal agency be looking into him? And why now? Then his phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. ***, stop digging. This is bigger than you think, ***. Marcus stared at the screen, his grip tightening. Someone knew he was searching for answers, and they wanted him to stop. He looked back at Carson. I need to find out who sent this. Carson frowned. You sure about that? Marcus nodded. Whoever this is, they're trying to scare me off, which means I'm getting close. Carson sighed, rubbing his temples. Be careful, man. Whoever's pulling the strings has reach. And if they're watching you this closely, they're not gonna let you just walk away. Marcus pocketed his phone, his jaw set. He wasn't walking away. Not now. Because one thing was clear, this wasn't just about a car. Someone out there didn't want him asking questions, and that meant it was time to start finding answers. Marcus gripped his phone, staring at the message. ***, stop digging. This is bigger than you think, ***. Shaw shot him a cold look before standing up. It doesn't matter anymore. This is where your story ends. He nodded to the two men standing near the door. Make it look like an accident. Marcus's pulse pounded. His mind raced. He couldn't die here. Not like this. One of the men stepped forward, pulling a knife. But before he could reach them, the warehouse door burst open. Blinding lights flooded the space. Drop your weapons. Hands where we can see them. The sound of boots hitting concrete filled the air. Armed officers swarmed in, weapons raised. In the chaos, Shaw's men hesitated just long enough. Marcus didn't waste the moment. He twisted his hands, feeling the rope loosen. Jarrett had been working on it. He broke free, lunged forward, and knocked the knife out of the man's hand. Jarrett scrambled up beside him as officers tackled the others to the ground. Shaw backed away, his face tight with anger. You don't know what you've done." Marcus stepped closer. "I know exactly what I've done." An officer pulled Shaw's hands behind his back, snapping cuffs onto his wrists. "David Shaw, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." Shaw didn't resist. He just stared at Marcus, shaking his head. "You think you won? This system chews people like you up and spits them out." Marcus met his gaze steady. "Then I'll make sure no one else gets caught in it." As Shaw was led away, Marcus let out a slow breath. Jared clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Guess we made the right kind of noise." Marcus nodded. It wasn't the ending he had expected, but it was justice. And sometimes that was enough. As he stepped outside into the crisp night air, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't just another soldier following orders anymore. He was a man who fought back and won.